About a month ago, I made a 40-minute video about Sia. She is, as I'm sure you know, quite a controversial figure within the autistic community. Sia is a pop musician and songwriter, but in 2021, she made a movie called Music about a very high support needs, non-speaking autistic girl. And Sia herself has referred to the movie as Rain Man the musical.
You know, I short described this movie as Rain Man the musical.
The autistic character was called Music, and the movie was criticized quite a lot for a one-dimensional portrayal of an autistic person, and also because other characters in the movie restrain Music a number of times in ways that are known to be dangerous, and the movie kind of presents these restraints as the perfect solution, the only solution really to Music's meltdowns. Once her sister, who has been forced to look after Music against her will, once she figures out how to do this, it's like she can finally cope with and finally understand autism, apparently. I watched the film for the first time and then I made that 40-minute video. I discussed my thoughts, but I also discussed the fact that since making the movie and receiving a lot of backlash, Sia herself was actually diagnosed autistic. It was a bit of a plot twist, so I wanted to discuss, does that change anything? Some people, mainly Sia's friends, believe it kind of fully excuses her, and other people online felt like it made it even worse that she was now diagnosed autistic as well. My conclusion was basically it doesn't really change things either way. She didn't know she was autistic when she made the movie. She didn't know very much about autism, and she still went ahead and made a movie about autism, about an autistic person who has a very different presentation to her. And she's also said that the character of Music was based on the autistic son of a friend of hers, so Music is based on one single autistic person. I personally feel like her own diagnosis doesn't really change that. I think what would have changed that would have been an apology and also removing those harmful scenes, which is something that she promised to do over Twitter, but then has just never done. But if you go to watch the movie now, you'll see that both of the scenes are still present. I've never heard of anybody seeing a version of the film without those restraint scenes in there. But I actually found that I did miss something pretty big. When I was researching for that video, it was tucked away behind a paywall on Apple Music. Sia has this interview with Zane Lowe that she did at the end of last year. She had a lot to say, and her reflections on the movie in light of her own diagnosis were pretty disappointing, sadly. So the main point of this interview was to unpack Sia's new music as in songs, not music the movie. It's not getting a sequel. Don't worry, don't panic. But it's the usual kind of Zane Lowe thing. If you've seen his interviews before, you'll probably know what I mean. He's usually over the top positive when he's speaking to artists, very encouraging. It's kind of how he gets them to open up. The conversation takes a similar turn with Sia, and they start talking about how her mental health was really low following the release of the movie and all of the backlash. She talks about how they'd had to cancel a previous interview due to her emotional state.
You've written a book of life, man, through songs. You continue to do it. It's amazing. I'm so glad that you did. I'm sorry you went through such a tough time to do it.
Didn't I have to cancel one of our sessions because I was crying too much?
Yeah, there was a moment when we were supposed to talk and it was just too much. You were very kind. You're like, I just can't do it right now.
It took me 20 years to make that movie. I made it, directed, wrote the music and wrote the film with my friend. It took me 20 years of thinking about it and then like 5-6 years to make it and then edit it.
And I do sympathize with Sia. I do genuinely think this was a project that she really believed in, and she put a lot of time and a lot of money went into this as well. I'm sure there were a lot of people counting on her. The movie made a really big financial loss, and despite having 2 Golden Globe nominations, which we'll talk about a little bit more, they'll come up a little bit later on, the movie was received very negatively both by critics and by the general public and by the autistic community. It isn't nice to fail, obviously, and I can't imagine what it's like to fail and then also have Twitter coming at you with pitchforks. It must have been pretty difficult to handle.
5-6 years to make it and then edit it. And then I got into a stupid Twitter spat with somebody autistic.
So here she makes it sound a bit like she had this great movie that she'd been working on for years and years, and then she got into one single argument on Twitter, and then that kind of triggered all of the backlash and ruined everything. She did have this one particular Twitter exchange, which has become sort of infamous now. There's lots of screenshots of it online, which I think she talks about later on within the interview. But while Sia becoming angry and defensive over Twitter, that certainly didn't help anything. That wasn't the reason why people, and autistic people in particular, weren't happy with the movie. Regardless, the movie's content is still the same. It was still an outdated portrayal that at times uncritically presented techniques which have led to autistic people losing their lives. Sia then goes on to talk about her own autism diagnosis.
Guess what else? It turns out, ironically, that then Kathy Griffin, one of my friends, said to me, I think you're autistic. And so I went and I had a neuropsych eval, and it took 18 hours over the course of like 5-6 days. And it turned out that I'm level 2 autistic, which is there's 3 levels.
Wow.
It feels a bit like Sia is using this as a sort of gotcha moment. The autistic people criticize me for making a movie about autism, but it turns out I'm actually autistic. But not just autistic, I'm level 2 autistic. I've hit the 2nd level. But maybe I'm looking at that too cynically. Maybe she actually wanted to emphasize her level of support needs and the fact that her assessment went on for 18 hours because she's had some pushback. She's had some people not believing her maybe in her real life and maybe online as well. I've definitely seen that, sadly, from some autistic people as well. In general, there were just some really odd responses online to Sia coming out and saying that she was autistic. Lots of people saying like, I'm sorry, or I'll pray for you, or like, I always thought you were weird and I always thought your music was weird. It's like, just shows you that the general public has some not great ideas about autism, which is why autism representation in the media does matter. But Sia then goes on to misrepresent these support levels.
I'm level 2 autistic, which is there's 3 levels.
Wow.
And 1 is Aspergers, 2 is pretty autistic, and 3 is like non-verbal.
So no, it isn't a scale from Asperger's to non-speaking. The DSM-5 diagnostic criteria has 3 levels of support. So the first one is requires support, and then level 2 is requires substantial support, not being pretty autistic, as Sia phrases it.
2 is pretty autistic.
And then level 3 is requires very substantial support. Diagnosticians can specify whether the diagnosis is being made with or without language impairment, as they call it, but support needs are not decided solely based on someone's ability to speak. Obviously, I'm not trying to undermine here the fact that being non-speaking will likely mean that somebody does need more support from the people around them, but the autism spectrum is not a straight line from excellent speaking ability to non-speaking on the other end. It would be a bit neater and easier maybe if it did work that way. Maybe that's why people like to see autism in this quite linear way. It's just, mentally a bit easier to organize, but it's actually really confusing and messy and all over the place, and there are loads and loads of different autistic traits. On this channel, I often talk about the spiky profile. Autistic people can have quite extreme strengths and weaknesses when compared to non-autistic people, but someone having skills in one area, whether that's songwriting or having an excellent speaking ability, that doesn't make them less autistic, basically. And then on the other hand, not being able to communicate by speaking doesn't mean that somebody isn't able to communicate at all. It also doesn't tell you anything about their intelligence or what strengths and talents they may have. We also haven't grouped autism into subtypes such as Asperger's since 2013.
1 is Asperger's.
This is because scientists found that while clinicians could reliably say whether somebody was autistic or not autistic, they couldn't reliably say if they had Asperger's or another one of the old subtypes of autism. And they also found no biological differences between these different categories of autistic person. Saying autism spectrum condition is therefore more accurate, particularly because autistic people do tend to be so different from each other. It allows for more individuality, which is great.
It made a lot of sense to me because I've suffered my whole life, like really suffered, and I didn't know why, and it felt like I had to put on a human suit all the time, like to go out and to be part of the world.
There's so much wrapped up in this because obviously it's to some degree what was drawing you to
that subject matter.
So they imply here that Sia was drawn to the topic of autism because she herself was autistic all along. In an interview before the movie was released, Sia did speak about how she's always felt like she has an affinity for people with special abilities, which is how she referred to autistic people at the time.
And they're called special abilities now, not special needs. Yeah, the people with special abilities.
I wonder if she would still use that phrase now, and I wonder how she would feel if somebody used that phrase about her. That might be quite telling, I don't know. But it seems like from what Sia has said, she was at least somewhat close to the autistic son of a friend of hers. Who knows, maybe she did feel somewhat safer around other autistic and disabled people. Perhaps she felt less pressure to mask or some sort of affinity for people who are also different from the norm because she'd always felt different in some way. However, that still doesn't make this a good or well-researched or well-informed or sensitive movie. Perhaps if she had done a bit more research, if she had known a bit more about autism when making this movie, she would have realized that she was autistic a lot sooner, or at least she would have upset the community a lot less. And while sometimes undiagnosed autistic people may find that they gravitate towards other autistic people, there are other autistic people that report feeling the exact opposite way towards other autistic people. This is a quote from an article titled Being Autistic Doesn't Absolve Sia of Dangerous Ableism, which was written by another late diagnosed autistic person. When I was in primary school, I felt a burning embarrassment watching an autistic boy in my class struggle to make friends and move his body appropriately in a playground. As an adult, I cringed at other grown adults having meltdowns in public or enjoying their special interests. Years later, at the age of 28, I was diagnosed as autistic. It is possible to be autistic and still view autism negatively, whether you know you're autistic or not. Zane also says here that maybe Sia wanted to tell music's story because she was going through the same thing.
To want to contribute to that subject matter, and also would explain why, when it was called into question and you were unaware of that you were so upset and felt so attacked because you were going through the same thing. This is an incredible realization.
Except music's story is not Sia's story. Music has a very different presentation of autism to Sia. And again, Sia based the character on her friend's son, not on herself. Just because somebody is autistic doesn't mean they're experts in the entire autistic experience, because it is a spectrum. I think Sia needs to be aware that having the diagnosis doesn't mean that she can do no wrong. Plenty of autistic people have internalized ableism and do and say hurtful things all the time. I think there are plenty of them probably over on the Fake Disorder Cringe subreddit.
But also what was extra funny was, someone had said, I should have gotten Maddie's part. These are the parts I miss out on that I should get. And I just wrote back like an asshole. I just wrote back like, or maybe you're just not a very good actor.
Yeah.
So Sia refers to herself as an asshole for clapping back at the autistic actor on Twitter. So it seems like maybe she does have some remorse for that. But she then goes on to act kind of sorry for herself for the fact that people then responded to her by saying she was a bad person.
What was terrible is it was just people were like, maybe you're a bad person. Maybe you're a terrible person.
I don't know if Sia realizes that there was a power imbalance here. She's a successful, wealthy person with a large fan base, and she was arguing with an unknown autistic actor on Twitter.
And plus you were mean to an autistic person, and that's ableist. And I was like, actually, I think it's the opposite of ableist.
Yeah.
I think I just treated her like I'd treat anybody else on the internet.
So apparently it would be ableist to not be mean and basically try and publicly embarrass autistic people. Maybe we should all be meaner to autistic people. What do you think? I don't know, maybe this is too idealistic of me, but maybe we should just try and be nice to everybody regardless of their neurotype. But now we know that Sia is autistic. Maybe she does struggle with communication. Maybe that does explain this tweet a little bit. Obviously autistic people can be pretty blunt, but along with this like maybe you're a bad actor tweet, she also did several other quite sweary, angry seeming tweets. So I think she was just kind of trying to clap back and be kind of nasty in this moment.
And so of course when it comes out that like I was just speaking to a peer.
Yeah. And no one knew, and nobody knew.
But the thing is, Sia wasn't speaking to a peer, and she doesn't seem to understand this. Most autistic people do not have a $16 million budget to make a movie about autism, which has the potential to influence the way people all over the world view autistic people. Just because she has the same diagnosis doesn't mean that she isn't in a position of power. But most autistic people do not have that loud of a voice. But luckily, the autistic community were able to be loud enough about this movie, and now anytime you search it, you will just be met with a lot of negative reviews and articles.
Like, I was just speaking to a peer.
Yeah, and no one knew, and nobody knew.
The irony. It was so interesting.
But also,
irony.
The way they both repeat, the irony here, and kind of laugh to themselves gets under my skin. Again, it feels very much like she's using it as a gotcha. You painted me out to be the bad guy, but it turns out I was one of you all along. But surely, with Sia's logic, it would be ableist of us to not continue to criticize her. But seriously, it's a shame because her diagnosis could have led to a bit more self-reflection and a bit more empathy for other autistic people. It makes me sad that instead it seems to have led to her and Zane Lowe laughing at the autistic people who criticized the movie. I get that it's Zane's job to kind of butter up the celebrities, and he may have not even seen the movie. He doesn't say that he has actually. He doesn't make any comments himself about the movie and about the quality of the movie. But I do wonder if this sort of like over-the-top positive vibe is the kind of vibe that Sia is surrounded by constantly. Does she have yes men and people around her who are just always going to tell her everything she does is wonderful? I mean, nobody questioned the movie at any point during production. A few people were fired for negativity on set, so maybe some people did.
I only had to fire 2 people, and as soon as anyone brought a bad vibe, I was like, you're fired.
There was backlash immediately once the trailer dropped, so there was even time to kind of go back to the drawing board then. I don't know, maybe we'd already spent the 16 million and it was too late and we just rolled with it. But I think this is all a pretty good example of why we shouldn't treat celebrities like all-knowing gods, because they're just people who make dumb mistakes and are maybe actually more likely to make dumb mistakes because they're kind of out of touch and living in a celebrity bubble, and maybe, you know, surrounded by people who are just gonna blow smoke up their bum constantly and tell them they're incredible. Is it really a surprise that Sia's movie about a non-speaking, very high support needs autistic girl who seemingly lives in poverty, is it any surprise that that fell flat? I also found this next bit quite interesting. I think Zayn wants to ask Sia what she's learnt following her autism diagnosis, but he can't quite bring himself to say the word autism or autistic. He refers to it as who you are and what it is you've been living with throughout your life and understanding how to live with that going forwards.
I guess my question is, like, moving forward now, aside from learning about who you are and what it is that you've been living with for throughout your life and understanding how to live with that going forward with a better knowledge of yourself.
I just wanted to say the word autistic. I think people are scared to sometimes.
Can't do it.
You can. You can do it. You can. You can.
I mean, there is disagreement about how autistic people like to refer to themselves. I mean, Sia has already referred to herself throughout this interview. I don't know, some autistic people like to say I'm autistic. Some people like to say I have autism. Maybe Zayn was somewhat aware of that and didn't want to get it wrong, but probably not. I'd say probably not. I do think people are scared to say it, perhaps particularly when they're talking to somebody who doesn't quite fit the stereotype. Maybe they feel almost like it's gonna be insulting. Often you see people kind of skirting around it or reverting to phrases that kind of feel a bit like euphemisms, like on the spectrum. Whenever I hear people say on the spectrum, I just instantly visualize like two moms in the playground kind of gossiping, whispering to each other, and one of them's like, oh, isn't Freddie a bit naughty? And then the other mom's like, oh, well, actually I hear he might be on the spectrum. Just want to say to any neurotypicals watching, it's not a dirty word. It's not a swear word. It's okay. You can say autistic. You can say autism. It's fine. I just think it feels like such a loaded word. It's such a stigmatized word.
What it is that you've been living with.
Anyway, for some reason, Sia's response to this is to bring up QAnon, the far-right conspiracy group.
What else did you learn from that experience, do you think, coming out?
It was unbelievable. I mean, I learned about QAnon. But that's not about me. About me personally, like, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm so grateful to Kathy Griffin for just saying, we think you're autistic and you should get tested. And then she taught me about all of the QAnon and Reddit and where things like that come from, like where all of the negativity comes from. And then about algorithms and how then that gets sent to wherever, whatever. I didn't know any of this shit.
It seems like she might have coped with the backlash by convincing herself that it actually wasn't genuine criticism, but it was just a result of conspiracy theorists online.
It was really devastating. I thought it was my fans and that they hated me, that they had turned against me. But it actually was people pretending to be my fans that turned against me.
Crazy.
And in fact, when I look back on it, it wasn't really real. Like, it never affected my music business.
I'm not surprised that it didn't really affect her music. I think there's not so much of a cancel culture online as there used to be. I don't think Sia's career needed to end. I wouldn't have wished for it to end. I wouldn't have wished for any harm on her. I think it would have been very awful if she had, you know, done something serious as a result of this backlash. I do, as I say, genuinely hope that she's doing okay. I get that there probably were a lot of people who went over the top online with the negativity. I mean, I saw this TikTok that went up at the time, which referred to Sia as a monster, which bit too much, bit too far. People often do just take it too far. I think it becomes kind of fun to have the like celebrity punching bag of the week. People can really enjoy the outrage for whatever psychological reason that is. And sometimes what starts as like a legitimate concern sort of devolves into a witch hunt. I mean, the whole thing with Blake Lively at the moment, again, started with some legitimate concerns and criticisms. And now I'm just seeing things like, in 2009, she glared at a co-star from across the room. She is evil.
Never affected anything. It affected the movie. Like, people wrote, you know, I got a Golden Globe nomination and they've sent a petition trying to get it taken away from me.
Yeah.
So that was heartbreaking.
I guess QAnon were behind the petition to get the Golden Globe removed as well. I feel almost mean joking about it though. It feels like she's quite far removed from reality. But Sia's response here seems so incredibly self-involved. They're trying to take my Golden Globe nomination away from me. It's weird because there's an interview from around the time when the movie was released where Sia kind of implies that she might be able to see where some people are coming from and like, oh, maybe some of these criticisms are correct.
We can't really talk about the film without acknowledging the controversy that surrounds it. What do you think people have got wrong?
Maybe they're not wrong.
But it seems like she's completely walked that back now and doesn't feel like she was at fault whatsoever. But anyway, despite the nominations, Sia ended up with 3 Golden Raspberries instead. She didn't get any Golden Globes. It is quite surprising that it was nominated in the wake of all the backlash, but apparently these things are often pretty corrupt, so maybe it's not surprising. Zane Lowe then goes on to suggest that maybe people's opinion of the movie will change with time. He actually compares it to this album that he didn't appreciate fully when it was first released, but now really, really loves and now can recognize that it was before its time. Sia agrees and is hopeful that the movie will have a comeback at some point in the future.
But also like, fuck, I got a Golden Globe nomination. That's like, that's so unbelievable.
Like, I mean, the art
That's
exists
crazy.
and the movie exists, it will forever
Still out
exist.
there,
I
and
always think about things like this as well, as that ultimately over time, art changes shape. As it's absorbed and discovered by people away from the context of the
I
time.
think you're right. I think it'll have a little renaissance. That would be really nice, be really sweet, make me really happy.
When I hear this, I do wonder why Sia ever said that she was planning to remove the restraint scenes. She also said on Twitter that she was planning to put a warning in the movie, and that hasn't happened either. Neither of those things have happened. I think it's clear from the way she speaks about this movie, I feel like you can hear it in her voice here that she still loves it. She's still very attached to it. I don't think she wants to change anything about it. I don't think she thinks there's anything wrong with it. I think she's completely closed off to that being a possibility. And I mean, yes, it would affect the plot to remove those scenes. I mean, you could argue that there isn't much of a plot to affect, but the plot that is there would be affected because, as I say, the restraint scenes are presented as the solution to music being autistic almost. In the storyline, it's like the most important thing, if not the only thing that Music's sister learns about, you know, how to take care of music. To be honest, when you think about it, without those scenes, I'm not sure how much music would even be part of the plot at all, which again is kind of part of the problem with this movie. So I don't think Sia wants those scenes gone, but I do think safety should come first. Who cares about the plot at the end of the day? We don't want people reacting to autistic meltdowns in this way, jumping on top of them and pinning them down with their full weight. One scene, Music literally is overwhelmed by some children running past her in a park, and their first reaction, rather than, you know, taking her elsewhere or doing something else to calm her down, it's like, no, we just need to restrain her instantly. I am sad that she seems to have found ways to completely dismiss all of the criticisms and just, you know, relieve herself of all accountability. I mean, it's kind of impressive in a way, the mental gymnastics that she seems to have done. I don't think it's too late for her to come out and truly apologize and, you know, actually take some action this time. I don't think she will, but I don't think it's ever too late. But let me know what you think. Do you think Music is going to be having a comeback in the 2030s? Let me know. Anyway, no more celebrity drama next week, I promise. I'm hopefully posting a video that I'm quite excited about. I've spent 27 hours scripting and researching it so far, and I'm nowhere near, I think I'm about halfway done probably. Thank you so much to everybody who does support me over on Patreon. It obviously would not be possible for me to be spending that much time on one singular video if it wasn't for patrons. I'm so grateful, and I'm also obviously very grateful to everybody who just watches here. But if you do join the Patreon, it costs $4 for the lowest tier, and then you can join the Discord server where you can chat to other autistic people and people who suspect they might be autistic. You don't have to be autistic to join. We've been doing quite a lot of fun stuff over there on the Taylor Swift channel. If you're a Taylor Swift fan, we need more Swifties in the server. We're always in need of more of them. We've been kind of ranking songs in the Tortured Poets department, and then we also all played Fall Guys, and it was really fun. We want to do that again soon. So if you're a fan of Fall Guys, or even if you never played it before, I might as well have never played it before because I'm so appallingly bad at it, but it was still really fun. I was laughing so much. It was such a great time. So we're definitely going to do that again soon. Yeah, my husband is very involved in the Discord, and he's really great with like organizing things and stuff. So thank you very much to him. It wasn't all down to me. And when you join, you get access to a load of exclusive videos as well. The most recent one is a wholesome, actually autistic TikTok reaction as voted by in the polls that I do over on Patreon. You get to choose what exclusive content you want. I've got hours and hours of stuff over there now, and there's loads more to come. Quite a few more book reviews coming. I'm going to be reviewing Paige Liel's book, and then I think I'm also going to be reviewing Ellie Middleton's new book that came out on the 5th of September. If you want to just stay here on YouTube, you might enjoy this video I did where I reacted to the fake disorder Utter Cringe subreddit, which I spoke about a few times within this video, and I'll also obviously link the first video that I made about Sia, the 40-minute video, in the description below. Hope this video is not 40 minutes as well, but with me, you never know. Anyway, thank you so much again, and I'll see you in my next video very soon. Bye.